Run, party, repeat. Welcome to the East Coast Adventures Dirt and Vert podcast, where we talk all things running, racing, and training to help you get ready for your next big adventure.
Learn from our successes and our failures, and have fun at the same time. Join us right here every week with inspiring guests who share their captivating tales from the trails. And remember, nobody cares.
Run faster. All right, welcome back. This is East Coast Adventures with the Dirt and Vert podcast. I'm David.
And I'm Matt.
And I'm Mike.
And we have a very familiar guest if you've been in any East Coast Adventures races or even any local race, probably around East Tennessee. You've met this man, but we have Rob Apple, who currently holds the world record for the most ultras ran. And Rob's number is currently at 803. And he will be moving on past that very soon as we're sitting here looking at his race schedule that's planned out. But Rob, just that's absolutely amazing. I mean, to even think about 800 plus ultras over your career so far. But if you don't care, just tell us a little bit about who you are and how you got into running.
Okay, I'm originally from Ohio, and I think like everybody, I ran a couple years in track, and then I went straight out and started doing road races. You know, this was back in the late 70s, and things were a lot different back then. There wasn't standardized distances other than maybe the marathon. And graduated from high school in 1979 and started running on my own, and saw the New York City Marathon on TV, and I thought, maybe I should do something longer. And I thought, I don't know, I think I'm a lot more fit than those people on that TV. Let's go for an ultra. and I'd read Runner's World quite a bit, and every once in a while they'd have an article in there about ultra running. Not very many, but there was a magazine called Running Times back then, and they had a little tiny section that had upcoming ultras. And it just happened, there was about 3 months out, there was one in Fort Wayne, Indiana, which was about 90 minutes from where I lived at the time. And so I just started doing about 10 miles a day. That's about the only training I had, no long races. And went up this was in 1982, before a lot of you were born. And I absolutely loved it. It was 50 miles. It was a 2.5 mile loop around a North American Van Lines parking lot. And I ran a 901, which I'd love to run that today. And absolutely loved it. And there was probably about 100 ultra runners there, and got to talking to everybody, being it was a loop course, and found out about Ultra Running Magazine. And just from there, just every time I could find a race, I just loved to travel and loved to run. So it was just like the perfect marriage for me.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So you did run track in school? Yeah,
I ran the mile and the 2 mile.
Did you just have a natural love for running even back then?
Yeah, I really did. I enjoyed the time alone, and back then I was a pretty good runner, so that made it fun. Had no clue it'd ever turn out to be where I'm at now, but it was something at the time that occupied my time and kept me in shape.
How fast were you, Rob? How fast did you run that 1 mile?
I was a 5'10". I could never break 5.
Hey, that's good. That sounds good.
Yeah. We back then, if you were going to state, you were probably running a 4:45 or a 4:30, but I was never in that league. So it was kind of funny. It was like this natural. Well, I want to keep moving up. Maybe I'll be faster, better, place better if the distance is longer, and that pretty much came to be.
Well, if you ran a 5:10 back, in the 80s, or that might even be the late 70s, 70s.
Yeah.
I mean, there was no super shoes back then, so I'm guessing you could run a 4:30 with those shoes.
Oh, yeah.
But there's a big difference in shoe technology from the 70s to the 2020,
Yeah. So back then, it was, it's Fender tracks, and running in spikes. So it was a whole.
It's cool because it was the real deal. It really is you running that, not the shoes. So that's awesome.
Did you, so how in the world did you find out in 1982 that there was even such things as an ultra?
It was other than that Running Times magazine, there was every once in a while there'd be you see an article maybe like in Sports Illustrated, they'd feature an ultra runner like maybe like once every 5 years or something like that.
I was gonna say that's like a unicorn back then, right?
Yeah. Runner's World had a few articles on ultra running. There was at that time, maybe towards more like the early 80s, there was a couple books out there by Tom Osler and Ed Dodd. And so there was a little bit out there, but if not for that Running Times magazine and that little section in the back, I think it had 4 races for the next 3 months, if you could imagine that. I think probably one was in California, one was in New York, and this one was in Fort Wayne. So
I have another question then for that is, how did you sign up for a race in 1982?
Well, well, back then, it was really archaic. You had an address and you sent them a self-stepped envelope and they sent you an entry form and then you wrote a check and put it in an envelope and sent it to them. And then you showed up on race day.
So back then there was no, I'm going to sign up for this race 12 hours before it's supposed to start.
Well, a lot of them did have sign up there at the race. So you did have that option.
Okay.
Just bring your checkbook, and I'm sure there were people back then paid in cash.
Race day registration.
Yeah.
How did you find out about a race though? Like there was no ultra sign up or run sign up. So how did you even know?
Well, like I said, Running Times was a different type of magazine than Runner's World, and it had a list of races, but it had results. So the main list of races was the marathons, half marathons, and it had it based upon regions. And it was kind of like ultra running in the beginning, where it was articles that had been sent into them, and then they published them. And it just happened that like this one little section in the back, it was color coded, and it just had ultras, and that's how I happened to find it.
And that is really cool. What I'm most impressed with when I look at this, like you started in 1982, but in 1983, you run 6 ultras. I'm impressed that there's 6 ultras in 1983. I'm just so impressed by that. And I look, and you had to travel all over, it looks like, to make that happen.
Yes. Yeah, Florida, South Carolina, Iowa, Ohio, Michigan, and Ohio. Yeah, I was putting some miles on that 1982 Celica.
Awesome. Nice.
So when you roll up to an ultra in the 80s, how many people still in the line with you?
The one in Fort Wayne was probably about 100 people, but for the most part, it was probably 30, 40 people. I wish I had pictures from back then. It was such a different group of people. It was very eccentric. So you had like the airplane pilot and the college prof, but then you had the guy that was living out of his car and just word of mouth driving up, and he was happy to do an ultra because he got to eat that day. And then the other thing,
which one of those was Rob?
Well, and that was what was so strange back then, is I was by far the youngest. I was 21 years old. And back then, most of your ultra runners, most people didn't start running ultras until they were in their 40s, late 30s, early 40s, and into their 50s. And the other thing that just was hard to believe back then, you may have only 1 or 2 women, and it was really just a male sport for the longest period of time. I mean, it stayed that way up until probably the late 80s, early 90s. And if you did see a couple women there, they were pretty much doing the same, all the same races. And it was pretty so much different back then that after a while you pretty much knew everybody, or you probably knew 90% of the people. Where today, gosh, if I know 10%, it's amazing.
Right. Do you know anybody? Is there anybody you kept relationships with from the beginning or in that first 4 or 5 years that you still know today?
Well, the one person would be on there would have been the third race I did in Columbia, South Carolina. That was Ray Korolewitz's race. It was a 24-hour that he put on at University of South Carolina. Boy, other than that, no, unfortunately not.
That's well, I mean, to be in the career as long as you have, like in this sport, I'd say that's probably unheard of for most athletes because, usually there's a burnout in 10 to 20 years.
Right.
And you've never experienced that. I mean,
No.
when we see you in events, there's a joy. Like you're excited and happy to be there. And it brings out the Rob Apple that we all have found to love and know. And I just think that's awesome. I mean, you bring such a fun joy to the events, and you're always lighthearted about it. And, if someone wants to take a picture, you're over there taking a picture, and it's just so fun to see.
He takes tons of pictures too. I mean, that's the awesome thing about it. When I see Rob's races report, I'm like, oh, he's going to have some cool pictures. You stop and enjoy it in and take time for the race.
Yeah, I would say, if I had one regret about my whole career, it would have been, it would have been nice to have had Facebook and iPhones back in the 80s and to have captured all that. I've got 60,000 pictures on my phone right now. I can only imagine, it would have probably been 1 million over 42 years. So,
yeah, I think it's so cool that you show up at Fort Wayne and there's 100 other roughly 100 other ultra runners. That's impressive in 1982.
There
seems like the whole population of ultra runners to me. But
yeah, it was pretty amazing. That event, it was put on by the Fort Wayne Track Club, which is probably one thing that is again different about back then. Track clubs put on ultra marathons, and they had a 60K, a 50 mile, and a 100K. And so, this is in October, and probably if you're most anywhere, it's probably going to be your last race for the year. And, you had to take your chances and go do as many as you could. And there wasn't that many to do. So with an event like this, everybody showed up.
Yeah.
That's so cool. So is Fort Wayne something that like everybody looked forward to doing? Was it a huge event?
I really can't say. I do know that that was the last year they had that race. I want to say maybe they had it a couple years before then. People weren't too keen on wanting to be out there for 9-10 hours watching a bunch of runners run in the cold. Things have changed.
People still feel like that.
Yeah, it's not a spectator friendly sport.
So like when you first got into it, you obviously fell even more in love with the ultra distance.
Yes, definitely.
Why? What drew you to that after you experienced it?
I think it was just such an enjoyment of the physical aspect of it, but then also the mental aspect of it. Physically being able to run that far, but then the mental part of just being patient, just staying in the moment, letting time pass, and just meeting other people that were just so different than people I had ever been around. And, I think I was just very lucky that I was able to do it from the beginning. I think I must probably went maybe 200 races maybe before I had my first DNF. And so if it's that easy for you, I mean, sure, you're going to love it and you're going to like it. When I grew up in Ohio, my dad was a truck driver, so there were no vacations. When he was on vacation, he wanted to stay home, and everybody. I lived in a subdivision, and everybody else was, their parents were teachers, and they'd go on these summer vacations. And I was always so jealous. It's like, God, I want to see something other than this cornfield. And so when I had that chance, I just burned it up.
Well, I mean, that's cool. And it obviously shows. I mean, you've traveled all over the place. And at this time in 1982, you're living in Ohio.
Yeah.
Is that what you
Yeah.
said?
I'm living in the Dayton area. Yeah.
So you were at least able to run 2 races in that 1983 that was at least in your own state.
Yeah. 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 Toledo was an event that I don't know if you guys have ever heard of Park Barner. He was a
No.
very good ultra runner back in the early '80s. He was there. So that race had a number of really good people running in it too. You know, that was the other thing. It was kind of like the ultras were an extension of the marathons back then, in that the people that ran them were pretty fast, which, you know, has totally changed. You know, you like think back about somebody running a 4-hour marathon back then. That was considered extremely slow. And, you know, the same way with, you know, doing a 50 miler back then. You know, I was always under 8 hours for 50 miles. And
I see that.
And even then,
I mean, your first couple that year were under 8 hours.
Yeah. And, you know, being under 8, I was still kind of in towards the end of the pack. So, but, you know, I felt good, and I just kept improving. That's what made it fun. You know, it's, I think you listen to anybody who talks about their running career, and it's whether they're doing 10Ks, halves, marathons, if you're PRing, getting better, that's what makes it so much fun. And it was just,
yeah, I mean, I see you're down in some low 6s in your 50 milers. So
yeah, my PR for 50 is 6:26. And
what course was that at?
That was in Birmingham. They had, which, you know, I can go through these races. I don't think any of these races exist anymore. But they, now it's at Oak Mountain. So now, you know, you have a number of races that are there at Oak Mountain. So back then, again, Birmingham Track Club put it on. And this is what's hard to believe about that race, was that at that time, I stayed in Hoover, Alabama. There was only one gas station at the Pelham exit. One gas station, no hotels, no restaurants, and at that time, that there were very few trails there. So we didn't run the trails at Oak Mountain. We ran around the road. It was a 6-mile road loop.
Wow.
Yeah, and, you know, again, at that time, you know, that race was one of the few, and people came from all over the country to run that particular race because it was a chance to see where he stood at the beginning of the season.
And I know, like, even now, like, getting off near Pelham, Alabama, there's still not a lot there. So I can only imagine, like, back then, because Blood Rock is over in that location. I ran it a few years ago. And and I think it's in that same state park.
You are correct. Yep.
Yeah. So that's a beautiful area. I could see why they would want to have it in there.
Yeah.
Was the road very hilly?
Yeah,
I would imagine it had some elevation.
Yeah,
there are plenty of mountains in there.
Yeah, my quads were toasted after that one, but I was just so happy to run a 6:26.
You're like your first few years into ultra running. What was probably the hardest thing that you had to deal with? Like, what did you learn the most transitioning from being like a track runner into marathons, and then just like, hey, I like this ultra, I'm going to go do this? Yeah.
So I went straight from being a half marathon. I didn't run any marathons until I was probably 100 ultras in. So the thing was just being patient. I was still, you know, so how I did it in the beginning is I had like a season where I would say in the spring, I'm going to do 50 milers. I'm going to do 100. In the spring, I'm going to do 24 hours and see how far I can go for 24 hours. And then over the summer, I'll concentrate on my 5Ks, 10Ks. And then in the fall, I'll go back and start doing 50 milers and 100K. So I really had a season set up. And then in the winter, I kind of, you know, took off. But, you know, back then, the hardest thing was just that time of being out there. And just being, you know, if you're going to run fast, or like, you know, I did 122 miles on a quarter-mile track in 24 hours. You know, to even do 100 miles on the track, you just got to stay on the track. You can't get off. Wow. You can't be talking. You got to stay focused. And that was probably the hardest thing to get used to. But,
Yeah.
it's like anything. There's portions of it that you go through that you struggle, and then there's other parts where you feel great. And, back then, I usually started slow and kept kind of an even pace. Everybody went out fast. So at the end, I was always passing people. And that was always a great feeling too.
Yeah, that comes with time. a few good failures, and you learn that real quick. So you have to experience that one. What is SEMO? SEMO?
That is the Southeastern Missouri University in Cape Girardeau. Yeah, that was the first place so it took me 3 tries to go over 100 in 24 hours. And so that was the first place I did it. Oh man, it was so hard, but I got it. And people, the question you always get asked, every ultra runner gets asked is, what's the farthest that you ever ran? And that's really easy for me, because after I did that 109, the next month I went to Atlanta and did 164 and 48.
Oh wow!
Yeah,
is that still your longest today?
Oh yeah, and it will be.
Come on, Rob.
Rob, now come on. I see a 200 in your future.
Yeah, they got that Ball State.
No. But that was on a quarter-mile track that was asphalt. Only time I've ever seen a quarter-mile track that was asphalt. And
what kind of damage did that do to the feet?
My hips, shoes you wear out on that.
My hips felt like they pounded steel rods into them.
Yeah.
And again, think back. There's no timing. It's a bunch of people sitting there, making little click marks on your timesheet, and they got their shifts that come and go. And
just everything. There's no canopies. There's no easy ups. There's no the foldable chairs. There's no jails. All that.
And the thing I keep thinking about is like,
shoes.
There is no cushion on those shoes back then. I mean, you're like running at Waffles or something. Like it's not ideal for running on a track for that long.
No.
You can imagine your toes were probably crying about 12 hours in.
Yeah, the other thing is too, back then we wore cotton socks. So
that's probably all you had, Rod.
Yeah. So what you would do, you just put these gobs of Vaseline all over your feet and just, hope it would hold.
Oh, that's those are blisters waiting to happen right there.
We don't know how good we got it now, do we?
I'm sure when you hear somebody complain now, you just kind of look at them like, oh.
It's kind of funny until I do something like this every once in a while. You're living in the moment. You're living the future. You really don't even think back until you actually look at it and you reflect. I mean, that's so long ago. I mean, the one thing that I have done is I've kept a running log ever since 1975. Yeah. So I've got almost 50 years of running logs. And so I write.
Well, I know.
And so I
just listen to what you go through here. It's like you could pick out, David could pick out any race, and I think you could tell us how many people were there and everything about it. You're right on it, like you just ran it yesterday.
Well, I remember certain parts of them, that's for sure. But I've been writing these logs, and in there I write the temperature, I write what I wore.
Oh wow!
Yeah, I write a lot more now than what I did back then. But I can go in my closet and pull out a logbook from 1988 and look at the Corn Belt 24 hour, and I'd have it detailed out. When I went through 50 miles, when I went through 100K. So
I wonder if you ever pull a book out and it says, "We should invent something besides cotton socks." Rob had $1 million idea sitting in
these socks
right there in the 80s.
Well, so everybody, kept trying to do things. I mean, some people, some guys were wearing pantyhose to get around cotton socks. Some people put on 2 pairs of socks, 3 pairs of socks. Yeah, I mean, some people ran barefoot trying to get away from the socks. So there was always, people trying something different.
It's crazy to think about where we've went with the sport. Like how much progression we've made. That's insane.
Yeah.
I mean, you didn't even have there was no hydration back then.
No.
What did you use? Just water and
it was Gatorade was out at the time, so you did have that. But a lot of guys, they had their own little concoctions where a lot of them would like tea with a heavy sugar amount in it. More sugar than what a Gatorade would be. You didn't have gels, so guys would drink what I'm trying to think of, log cabin syrup.
Oh goodness!
Yeah.
Oh,
Greg.
So there, and
make
so there, there wasn't any thoughts of that. There was a couple people trying to do their own energy drinks and trying to get away from the Gatorade thing, but nothing like today. The first thing that really came, Brian Maxwell, who was a Canadian marathoner, he was an Olympic Canadian marathoner. He was the one that came up with power bars, and that was really the first time that we had something that you could carry with you and have some nutrition to it.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's so at this point, sodium, electrolytes, none of that's even really being talked about. You have no idea, right?
Well, I was always kind of interested. So I got my undergrad is in accounting from Wright State, but I got my master's degree in exercise physiology from Miami University in Oxford.
Ooh.
And so I always had an interest in the sciences and trying to understand the body more and more. So I was pretty open to reading different studies and, the research that was going on back then, which wasn't much, but there was a little bit going on. But just to give you an example, this was probably one of my best races that I ever ran. So in 1989, I ran the Strolling Gym in 4:58. So to break 5 hours in the Strolling Gym course it's almost impossible. So back then I was 10th overall. Today, if you run a 4:58 at the gym, you might have a good chance of winning it. But I ran that race with nothing but a pair of shorts and a couple of caffeine tablets in my shorts. No shirt, socks, and shoes, and that was it. No camera, no nothing. And so back then, Gary, all he did is he put water jugs out alongside the road. And so you were literally just running along at about a 7:15, 7:30 clip, just bending down, grabbing one of those gallon jugs, ripping the top off, getting as much water in, and then just throwing it down on the ground.
Simplicity. So simple.
So I did not take any carbohydrates in that day. It was just straight water. And
you ran it in 4:58.
4:58. So there's somebody out there certainly knows how many people have ran the Strolling Gym because it's been around forever. But there's only 3 people in the world that have broke 5 hours and have ran 1,000 miles on the course. It's David Jones, who lives here in Murfreesboro, myself, and Dink Taylor. So that's pretty unique company.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's you didn't even think about anything else other than I just need my running shorts. I'll be fine.
Yeah. And some water.
I'm guessing Laz probably wasn't much different back then than he is now. Correct?
Exactly the same. Yeah.
Yeah, I think if he could still get away with that, he would do the exact same thing.
Yeah.
So,
I love that the next race is called Mr. BS Goat Farm.
Okay, so this was one of the very first races that I won, and so this was in Detroit, and it was a bike path, and the reason it's called Mr. B's. Mr. B's was a bar.
Okay.
It was Mr. B's Goat Farm was a bar, and so we started a rest area. And we just ran down this bike path until we got to Mr. B's Goat Farm. And of course, there's beer at Mr. B's and I'm going to win. run into the pier. Yeah, and
Now that sounds like a fun race, Rob.
yeah, it was my kind of race, and it was really funny. The race director, he every year he'd add another mile to the course, so he would just bump it a little further out on the greenway. So yeah, like I said, a lot of these just they're not in existence anymore.
That's kind of cool. I mean, you've got to experience so much that, we'll never even see.
And still, yeah, all these, he's having to mail stuff in and everything. I mean, it's not like he just went a couple of years and had to do this. I mean, we're talking years of this.
Yeah.
1990 Mountain Masochist.
Yeah. Now this is so up until this point about, I'm really young, and what I'm just trying to do almost every time now is PR. And, I'd do my water and I would take Excedrin to kill the pain, not knowing about liver damage or anything like that. And so
you look fine, Rob. It didn't hurt you.
And so I'm getting pretty competitive. And I think at this time, I could probably say I'm maybe in the top 10 in the United States as far as 100K, 50-mile races. And the world championships came to Duluth. There was a race up there. It was called Edmund Fitzgerald, and it was a really good race that had all the really good runners from the United States. But they finally landed the world championships, and unfortunately, I entered. I had my plane ticket bought, but we had a schedule change in my classes for my undergrad, and my professor wouldn't let me out of it, and I wanted to graduate, so that kind of ruled on that one. But that same weekend, I got to looking around. I go, there's got to be an ultra I can run. And so I said, well, Mountain Masochist. And I had never run anything like that before in my life. But I said, that's only a 50-mile. I can come back on Sunday and catch a 50K in Columbus. And so,
Sure did.
And so, I thought, well, that won't be too bad because, 2 weeks before that, I'd done AMJA, which was a really good race in Chicago. I did 100K there. I did Muncie 50K that next Sunday and survived that. But Masochist was really slow for me. I think that was the first time I'd taken over 10 hours to run a 50-mile. But in those two races, I just said, you've got to slow down. And, no Excedrin, no painkillers. You're going to have to just have fun and enjoy it. And I think that just changed my whole mindset. And that at that point, I really put in my mind, I just want to do as many as I can, and let's not mess anything up. And it worked. So, after that, I just started doing as many as I could. And at that point, I was just thinking, maybe I can get to 100 ultras. That's only 35 more. That won't be too bad.
So I have another question that just kind of goes back to, here and now and back then. And Mountain Masochist is, it's a pretty hard trail race, correct?
It was, yeah. Back in the day, for me coming off the road, I had no clue.
So how did you carry everything? Did they have packs, or did you have a backpack? Like what was even available back then?
So back then, at that point, you were carrying a water bottle, with the handhelds. You did have that. There was some really, Western states was making some really bizarre packs where the bottles were in the back across your butt. They were pretty uncomfortable, but there was a number of things out there. But most guys were just carrying their water bottles in their hands, and tying your jacket or whatever around your waist.
See, Matt would have fit in back then. He would have just put on his fanny pack that he wears everywhere.
Hey, fanny pack works great.
Yeah, so you if you're signing up for like a 100K, 100-mile race, you're going with a water bottle and whatever you can find to carry something like.
Right. Yeah.
That's kind of interesting to think about, because I can't imagine back then that an aid station is anywhere like what it is today.
You're exactly right. Yeah. I mean, back then it was pretty much, you probably had bananas, probably some chips, maybe some cookies. You probably was water, maybe some Gatorade, maybe some powdered Gatorade, but and no medical, nothing like that. So yeah, it's come a long way.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think that's just so cool because I mean that's just grit and determination in some of that, because like to run 40 miles and only drink water, like it's just, you sit here and think, and you're like, some people can't make it 5 miles without an aid station and they're upset. And I'm like, Rob's over here with a water bottle and cotton socks and a jar of Vaseline, and he's like, let's go.
I'd be cramped up. No salt and electrolytes. I'd be like, I'm done. I'm cramped up like crazy.
So at what point in all of your tour here, your 800 plus races, at what point did this record pop into your brain? Like, at what point were you like, I'm going to start doing this? I think this is something that I can do.
I think it was probably when I got up into like the mid 100s. Ultra running was being made then and being published then, and you'd see different guys. I remember at the time, Dick Collins, who ran Western States. He died of a heart attack when he was 62. He paced Helen Klein. He was up to 234 ultras, which is, back in the day, it was pretty much, California was the epicenter of ultra running. That was, that was a place where you didn't have to travel much if you wanted to race a lot. And I thought, it may take me a while to get to his record, but I think I can. I'm a whole lot younger. And, once I got him, then it was, just reading who's maybe next. And at that point, and I'm having so much fun with it, I'm not really thinking about going for the record, or I just want to do as many as I can. And as time went on, there's always different races. There's always different challenges. And that's what, has made it so fun over the years. I think, I did 700 in Italy in the Dolomites, and it's always kind of interesting what your mind goes to when you get close to 100. Maybe it's just being an accountant, but you get kind of jacked and you're going, it's like, it was like when I did my interview for Trail Running Magazine, and I told Jared, I said, you just don't want to be that guy that dies at 799, because that's all you're going to remember. That's all you're going to be remembered as is, damn, he almost got it. He almost got it. And that's how I kind of felt at 299 and 399. It's like, man.
Yeah. So I see that you also did JFK. So you've done JFK, it looks like, multiple times.
Yeah, I did JFK. A lot of these races I probably did 15, 16, 17 times. So in 2000, I made the move down to Nashville. I was done with Ohio, and I wanted to get out of there. I think I wanted to leave Ohio the day I came out of the womb. And I finally decided, that's why I traveled so much. I just wanted to leave Ohio. So there's your reasoning. And so, a lot of these races up until 2000 were in the Midwest. And then at that time, again, something to really think about. Ultra running in the South wasn't really thought of. There were very few races in the South, Strolling Jim. I'm trying to think, what else would have been, maybe you'd call Masochist one in the South. Kentucky had a 50 miler for a while. There just weren't that many. And the trails were here. We didn't have the race directors. Mm-hmm. And, it was really when Dink started putting on Mountain Mist, that gave us a race down here. And, when I moved here in 2000, that's when I think ultra running really started getting more popular in the South. And, I started doing more races down here, and then I stopped going back up north and doing like Ice Age and JFK and all the Bull Run and a number of those races.
Well, it looks like, and I think it's kind of cool that you've got some nostalgic races here that go this far back. And I think it shows the history of where we're at. But like, you got Western States, you've done it in 91, you did Vermont in
Yeah.
91. But you also did, which is, a race close to us, which, it's one of the oldest races around here, I believe. But that's the Arkansas Traveler.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was much different back then, too, as you can imagine. I think what really changes things is when the race directors change. And of course, everything changes over time, but they were all kind of the same in that they're all kind of low key. You had to watch the course markings. You didn't expect much at the aid stations. But again, it's, at that time, I also was going to Texas a lot. I had some friends down there. So, it's like anything. People from Texas would go to Arkansas. It was a chance to run with them for the week and the weekend. And so, yeah, I did Western States. I did Vermont in 91, and I didn't do another 100 for a while. And then I really got back into it in 98 and 99. And then really, I did the Grand Slam in 2004 and 2005. So, I'll never do 100 again, but I'm glad I did the ones I did. I've probably done about 60 hundreds.
Oh, wow. And if in 97, you did the Traveler, but you also did, and I don't know what this is, so that's why I bring it up, but Mohican Trail.
Yeah. So Mohican Trail was a 100-miler in Ohio. And
is it still a race that's put on?
Yeah,
I've never heard of
it. Yeah, it's still being put on. It's a different race director. It's still kind of in the same area. It's Mohican State Park is where it's at. It was Ohio's first Trail 100, and it started out. It was a joint venture between Cleveland West Track Club and Fort Wayne Track Club, and they got together and they had there were a number of grizzled vet ultra runners up there that helped them lay out the course and put it together, and it was a really good race time. I only got to do it probably 3 or 4 times, and actually that race director left that race and went to go put on Burning River. So
I've heard of Burning River.
Yeah, but Mohican's still out there. Yeah.
So was it 100-mile point to point?
No, it was a big loop. It was a big loop. It was some dirt roads, some horse trails. Ohio's not known for its trails, so I don't know if you've ever done Burning River, but it's just kind of it's just a combination of road and trails through city parks. Yeah, so much different. I think that was the thing in Ohio too. Doing an ultra up there, if you're doing any kind of trail run, it was probably going to be 5-6 mile loops at the most. There wasn't there wasn't the point to point or the big loops, like we get to enjoy down here.
Yeah.
So what is the? I was just scrolling through here trying to look, and it looks like I mean, I haven't made. There's so many pages on this ultra tour that you have, which is just so cool. But what are the most races you've done in a year? I did, and I think I'm looking at it. Is it 44?
44.
You got it marked as yearly record.
Yeah, that was 44 in 2002.
Oh my God.
And so I did 26 ultras in 26 weekends. I missed 2 weeks because there were no races, so I had to double up. That was the year that I got 300 lifetime, and I did a double out in California. Bishop High Sierra I did on Saturday, then I drove to San Francisco and did Ohlone on Sunday. And you got to remember, guys, I'm not retired, so it's literally I'm calling in sick on Friday, and getting on a plane in Nashville and flying out to California, and then as soon as I'm finishing Ohlone in San Francisco Sunday, I'm on a red eye back, and I'm flying back home, getting out of the plane, getting in my car, and driving into work. I did that. Yeah. I did that. Every Western States I did, other than the first one. That's the way I always did Western. It's the way I did Leadville. It's the way I did Wasatch. Red eye back, and it's really weird when you're running at night and you're doing a 100-miler and you think for a minute, okay, tomorrow night I'm gonna be flying home at this time.
And all this, you had to have all this prearranged, or was it? Yeah, that's just crazy, Rob.
Yeah, did you have your plane
planning
ticket
alone? And somebody says they're going to do this in this day and age. I'm like, okay, you can plan it as you go. We all know you can buy airline tickets as you're running if you want to, but you've done all this pre-existing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you had all your plane tickets already pre-bought. So as soon as you finished the race, you were just there ready to go?
Yeah. Yeah. Grab up my drop bags and just head to the airport.
Did you ever not make a flight back?
No. I was very fortunate. I never got sick, or never got to the point where I couldn't drive. I never used a crew, never used a pacer, just, wing it on my own. But yeah, I was always very fortunate.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So you said you were an accountant, right?
Yes.
Have you kept a log of how much you've spent on races?
Okay, so
knows the temperature. I'm sure he does.
So we'll do a little math lesson here. So 800 ultras, if they cost $1, that's $800.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
If they cost $10, that's $8,000.
Yeah, I'm thinking that D.
If they cost $100 each, that's $80,000. What if it's closer to $1,000? Now we're talking $800,000.
Well, and that's what I was just thinking about. Like if you think about not even registration, but if we think about registration, and most of these are out of your state, so you're either A, driving, or B, getting a plane ticket. So you've got multiple $100s into each event.
Yep.
Yeah.
Back my brain just went to like he's probably spent at least $250,000 on races, I guess. Like,
well, a lot of I don't see how I could anyway do 800 today at today's prices. Back in the day, like JFK, when I first started doing it was like a $25 race. But I used to say, rule of thumb, a weekend was probably going to be $1,000. Entry, rental car, flight, probably $1,000. And I went out to Catalina, and that was a $2,000 trip. So the cost is really, hotels are probably triple what they used to be. Mm-hmm. Rental cars, I think, maybe double. And the races are a lot more expensive than what they used to be.
But, absolutely.
And airfare's definitely gone up. But
yeah,
I don't keep track of what I've spent. I just know how much I've made over the years, and I know how much I don't have.
But you know what? Like, there is no amount of money that's ever going to make up for the accomplishments and the memories that you have and the people that you've met. Yeah. Like, we wouldn't know who you are if you didn't do what you do, Rob. Right. We see you in our events and like we love it, and that's the thing is like there is no way in the world that people would know the Rob Apple without you doing all this, and it's just absolutely amazing. You were in Ultra Running Magazine not too long ago as well.
Yeah, that was so. Jared did an article, I think it was 3 years ago, for Trail Runner, and he did that. And he's not an ultra runner, so it was So he knew a friend that was an ultra runner. He didn't know anything about it, and he got to asking someone who has the most ultras, and the guy said, "Well, there's no doubt it's Rob Apple." And so he sent me a link on Messenger. And said, "Would you be willing to do a story?" And I said, "Oh, sure. I'll be willing to talk to you." And it took us about 6 months to put the article together. And he's a freelance writer, and so he just writes stories and sells them. And I thought, I'm an old ultra runner. They don't do stories on old ultra runners. And so he took it to Runner's World. They said no, and he said, "I'm going to try Trail Runner." And I thought, I don't think Trail Runner will take, because I don't jump in the air anymore.
Like Melinda does.
Oh, wow.
And luckily the editor of that magazine's known me a long time, Tia, and they took it and we submitted the pictures to him, and it worked out really well. He learned a lot about it, ultra running, and again, it made me go back and think about different things. And then he has been keeping up with me. And when I got to 800, he said, give me a call. And then he put together that article for ultra running, which was a really good article.
Yeah, it was a really well-written article. And the pictures were just awesome too, that they took. So
big old smile.
Yeah. So what was really interesting, we did that during COVID. And I wasn't, it really worked out well for me because during COVID year, I only got 3 ultras in that year. 3 Sisters, Cloud Splitter, and Firewater. And so it would just literally be, 2 or 3 nights. I'd be on the Greenway and he'd call and we just keep working on the story, working on it. Finally got the story done. And then, like I said, I've got 60,000 pictures on my phone. So I got plenty of pictures to use. But they said, we can't use iPhone pictures because the quality's not good enough. Do you know a professional photographer? And I figured I could find somebody because I know enough people here in Murfreesboro, but I thought, damn, I don't want to do the shoot in Murfreesboro. And luckily, so Trail Runner is owned by a company that owns also Rock and Ice, which is a magazine that's for climbers. And so they said, would you be willing to drive to Asheville to shoot? I said, oh, hell yeah. And so I drove over there and I hooked up with the photographer and we went up to the Art Loeb Trail. And he shot a lot of the pictures up there that were just, the quality is so much better than the iPhone. And so that worked out really well. It's a great weekend.
They turned out awesome. So I have to ask you another question then. Like if you could, it's going to be a hard question for you to answer, I'm afraid, but I have to ask it. And that's, what is the most memorable race of your entire career so far?
Oh, it would have to be UTMB.
Okay.
Yeah, in 2009. That's a pretty easy one to say because in 2009 UTMB was again totally different than what it is today. Entered online. I had been to England. I hadn't been to France. I hadn't been to Chamonix, and it was truly one of those. I flew into Paris, drove down, and did the race. And the first time you see Mount Blanc, it pulls you in, and you just can't get away from it. And once I did it, I just said, I'm going to try to come back here as often as I can. And so I've been from 2009 until 2018, I was over there 20 times. And I started, so UTMB, as you all know now, has probably 5-6 races that are associated with it. So, there's a race that starts Monday, a race that starts Tuesday, Wednesday, and of course UTMB starts Friday night. But then what I did, so I often tell people, if you want to go do UTMB and you can't get in it, there's still other races that run on that trail. So Mount Blanc Trail is exactly like our Appalachian Trail or like our PCT Trail. And so a lot of people use that trail. And so by doing that race, it got me over there 20 times. Last year was 2018. I hope to make it back again soon. But just to see all those different trails over there and meet those people, the experience is just it's like no other. And the Europeans are they're great people. It's so cool. When you compete in those races, you have an American flag on your number, and you'll come into an aid station, and these little kids just come running up to you because you're an American, and they just want to speak English. So they're just asking you any question they can think of, just so they can hear you speak English and they can respond back. And the pictures that you take over there they're just jaw dropping. I mean, it's just, the beauty is incredible. So that's
you go run, make me want to go run right now. Okay.
So I got one. Go ahead, Compton. And everything like that. Rob, is there another passion that you have that we just don't know about at all, other than running? Because I think there's so much more to you than than running. This is what we see you at. That's obviously what we're talking about. But is there something else that you're just like Monday through Friday? You're like, man, this is really like cooking, or what else is there, Rob?
No, I'll kind of follow through with this one. So I get up around 5 o'clock, roll out of bed, I got a gym here, and I go and I work out, and I get to work about 8. Leave work at 5, go to the Greenway. I'm out there for probably 3 hours. Come back in, go to sleep, and just do that again, and do that, Monday through Friday, unless I'm racing. Saturday and Sunday, I do 20 miles on my Greenway. So that's when I get to run with a lot of my local friends. So that's a good time. So my only interest, in a few people know this. So when I was in my early 50s, I was working with a girl that raced horses. She was a barrel racer, and I have never rode a horse. Only time I'd ever seen a horse was either driving down the road or seeing them in some of the 100-milers that had horses.
Mm-hmm.
And and so I didn't know much about barrel racing. I knew something about rodeo, and I knew it was a pretty big deal. And she said, Friday night, I'm going to be in Murfreesboro. Will you come watch me race? Well, sure. Absolutely. It was like a couple miles from where I lived. I had no clue, had absolutely no clue. And you pull into the parking lot. And of course, I don't have a cowboy hat or cowboy boots. So, so it's bad enough that I've got long hair, but I've got shorts on, and I will never forget this. So the barrel race was at Tennessee Miller Coliseum, which is a big coliseum here in town. They have horse events every month. But I will just never forget pulling the door open on that arena, and that smell of horse and dirt was like nothing I'd ever smelled before. And I thought, I absolutely love this. And I think what really hooked me was knowing her, I was able to go back into the stalls and watch them go through all their prep, getting the saddle on and getting the rein on and just doing all that. And I just got so excited just watching her race. And I can never forget, she's going through all this prep and everything, and run into the arena, watch her race. And, they do the pattern in 14 seconds. And they raced around 3 barrels. It's like 14 seconds. So I go back after she's done running. I go, that was a hell of a lot of work for 14 seconds. If I'm going to do that much work, I'm going out for 8 to 10 hours. but such good people. And, they remind me a lot of ultra runners, and they're a lot of fun to be around. And I had just so many questions. Again, I'm really into human performance. So it was fun to watch the horses run and what all goes into them. And so when I went, I was hooked, and I started reading, and there's a thing in Las Vegas. It's called the NFR. It's the National Final Rodeo. It's 10 days. It's the 15 best of the bull riders, the broncs, the barrel racers. And I told her, I said, hey, I'm going to Las Vegas. She goes, really? I said, yeah. I said, no, I'm not going to go. I got to find a race. I can't go out there just to do this rodeo thing. And so luckily the Hoover Dam Marathon is the same weekend as the NFR. So it just worked out perfect. And so that's my passion on the side. That's it's really funny. Every once in a while you'll get to talk to different people at ultra runner. And there is a little bit of carryover between endurance horse riding and ultra runners. So
I was going to say, did you take a belt buckle with you?
Yeah.
You had plenty. You could almost make a belt of belt buckle. Yeah.
I kept my brand, and I just walked in with my shorts on and just hope nobody'd get too upset about it.
So I was going to ask you, like, of 800 races too, this one, it may be easy for you to answer, but I was just curious, like, what's the coolest award or medal that you've received?
Yeah, boy, I've got so much different stuff.
So there's not like one major one that like sticks out for you.
I'm just looking through here and thinking of all the different stuff that I've got. No, not really. Not really. Not something I've got framed and got on the wall here in the house. No, not really.
Yeah, where are all of these medals? Are they like,
We got
So
a wall.
do you have a wall of Rob?
a wall of shame. No, there's a stack of medals sitting over there on that kitchen counter, and a stack sitting in the closet. I'm not a big put it up, kind of a thing. I've probably, I'm probably down to maybe 100 shirts. I give all my shirts away to like AmVets or Goodwill. I'm not a pack, I'm not a big keeper of stuff.
Well, I mean, that makes sense. You've been a minimalist since you started running because you were forced to be. So,
Right, right, right. Yeah,
well,
I tell you what, probably what I'm going to say is my number from my 700th Ultra. That was in Lava Rodero, which is in the Dolomites, so when I was growing up as a kid, I read a magazine called Rock and Ice, which is just climbers. I never climbed. They always had these beautiful pictures that were just crazy beautiful. And that's how I found out about Chamonix and Mount Blanc and the Dolomites. And so the Dolomites is about a 5 to 6 hour drive from Chamonix. It's a haul. And I went over so UTMB is in September. So I started going over in September, and I started going over in June and July. And I first time driving the Dolomites again, one of these places is just absolutely incredible. The two race directors were great. And I decided pretty early on I wanted to make 700 there when I was probably around 670, 680. And I actually had to pull back some to make 700 there. And I'm running, and the reason I wanted to do 700 there is because you guys know how it is. Every race I go to, it's Rob. Well, when is this?
Yeah.
Yes.
And I always answer the same. I say, if I finish, because there's no
Yep.
guarantee. Ultra gods have their plan. You got yours. And so I went there. I told a couple of friends back here, but I didn't know anybody running the race. And I wanted to do that because I wanted 700. I wanted to do 700 and have nobody asking me what number this was going to be. And actually, so I had lined up 3 100Ks back to back to back. One in Italy, one in Switzerland, and then one in France. That's let's see. That was in get my pages here. That was in 2015. And so we're running along, and I'm having a pretty good race. That race is one of my favorites. 120K. It's got runnable parts, and I'm running along, and this guy's got poles. He's an American. I didn't know his name. He didn't know my name. And we're probably about, I don't know, 50, 60 miles into it. And he's walking beside me. And I don't know how this guy did this, but somehow he hadn't used poles much. He was able to turn around and put that pole in between my legs, tripping me up. And before I hit the floor, I was thinking, you dumbass, don't you know I'm going for 700? I didn't say that. I got up and I finished. And it's really the finish of that race is so beautiful. You come into Cortina, you're running on these cobblestone streets, and I just never know what my reaction is going to be when I hit 100. Am I going to cry? Am I going to laugh? And I remember finishing. It was late at night, and there was a few people standing out, and I went up and I handed my camera to this girl that was working. I said, "Will you take my picture?" And that's the picture that's on my phone of my 700th there. Didn't think anything about getting the award. Didn't think about handing my chip in. Just walked straight to my car and fell asleep. So I never got the vest from there. I had to go back that year to Chamonix and mail the chip back to Italy, so I wouldn't be charged for it. So yes,
Wow.
so a long way is so that number means probably more. That's probably the best thing I've got because that's the only thing I got from that race. In a good picture.
So you had to mail the chips back for the race bibs?
Yeah, so it's a timed event, And so I totally, you're supposed to, when you finish, cut the chip off your shoe and put it in the bucket.
Okay.
I was so tired. I was so cold. Like I said, I didn't get my vest, and I just walked off with the chip. And I'm like driving halfway. I got to go back to Chamonix, which is about 6 hours back. And I didn't even realize I didn't take it off. I thought, oh God. And I figured, oh, they won't miss that. But yeah, they did. And they said, hey, can you get that back to us? And I said, yeah, I'll be back over there in about 3 months. I'll mail it to you.
That's funny.
Wow.
I think it's interesting that they're using shoe tags too. A lot of people have gone away from that. So I would imagine that 120K is a lot of elevation then, right?
It's not as much as some of the races over there. The Dolomites are a little bit flatter than the Alps. I want to say 120K was probably maybe 6,000-7,000 feet. That's the thing about Europe. You're not talking like UTMB. You're sticking around 6,000 to 8,000 feet, and the Dolomites are probably around 4,000 to 5,000 feet. So you're not going up really high. Like you would at Leadville or Hard Rock or any of those races.
Oh, I was just thinking, looking at them mountains. I mean, I was thinking 20,000 foot. Okay.
Yeah, no. The thing that's deceiving about it is the tree line's really low. So you're popping out of the tree line probably around 5,000 feet.
Mm-hmm.
And so, it really gives you the impression that you're much higher than what you are.
Yeah.
See, I see where it all starts here with, with getting to know us and Tony and Kathy, because it looks like 2015 you run the pistol.
Right. Yeah.
But then you run at the end of the year Firewater. So 2015, I assume, was your first year at Firewater.
That's
and then it's history from there.
Yeah, I want to say that first year I did the 50K. That's when we started at the bridge.
Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so the next, I think I did the 50K 2 years, and luckily I did the 100K. One of the years that they had the 100-mile, and I love that race. It's one of my favorite trails. So beautiful.
It is.
I think 17 they stopped the 100 or something like that.
Yeah. So the year I did the 100K was the last year they had the 100-mile. Yes. They didn't have a whole, didn't have a lot of participation, and
no, it got pretty vague out there. Not vague, but just we were pretty spread out and so forth like that. 16 was the first year I run the 100K. And I think that was last year, the 100-miler, if I'm not mistaken. So we're right in there. Or it could have been 15.
I mean, that course is just set up perfect for a 50K and 100K.
It is. It really is.
Well, I had always done the 50K, and, I got to talking to Kathy, and Kathy said, you're, the most runnable part you're missing by not doing the, out to the golf course and back. And that, I was so lucky I got to run it that year. I was in a really good shape. I'd been running pretty hard, and it worked out really well. Yeah, my time was 22:45, and so now I think their cutoff's 18, so I wouldn't be able to finish it anymore.
Yeah, that course it's deceivingly hard, but it's so runnable that I think that's the reason why. And the lake views are just beautiful.
Yeah, that was the thing about doing the 100K. You're out there at night.
Mm-hmm.
And the lake is just so beautiful.
It is.
Yeah, I was, we were pretty spread out, and I was coming back to where the bridge was, and, I was totally alone, and I come up on these coon hunters, and, it's the middle of the night. I got my headlamp on, and they got their dogs, and they go, "What are you doing out here?" And I just came right back. "What are you doing out here?" And so he had this GPS unit that was like as big as a shoebox, and he'd gotten turned around, and he said, "Is the parking lot up here?" And I said, "No." I said, "That parking lot's probably 3 or 4 miles." I said, "It's over an hour." I said, "The parking lot you want's right up here." And I don't know whether he ever found it or not, but Yeah, it was quite an experience.
You know what I love is even like looking through your race results as throughout the years, you still pick some pretty tough races to do. I mean, you've done Blood Rock multiple times. You've done, several tough 50Ks and stuff, but Blood Rock is no joke. I mean, you got Zion 50K on here.
Yeah.
Which is a beautiful course.
Yeah.
It's,
so right now, what I see changing, and I think it's kind of the economics of the sport. It used to be 50Ks were standalones, or 100-mile was a standalone, and now, luckily for me, what we're seeing is usually it's a 50K, 100K, or maybe 50-mile and 100-miler.
Yeah.
And so if I'm lucky enough, I can find a 50K that uses the same time schedule as a 100-miler. I can fit that in. And so more places are doing that.
I think more people love 50Ks. I mean, that's just where the beauties of it at.
So. Yeah.
I mean, and the honest truth is like, and we've even like talked about this for the Cherokee with what we're doing, but like we're going to be out there with the 100K-ish plus anyway.
Yep.
So, we're being more graceful on that 50-ish K time, because you're going to be out there anyways. And I think that's what seems to be happening more and more, but it makes sense for the people that either are getting new into ultras, or the people that don't want to, go out there and run 8-minute miles and just, want to have a good time. They can sign up for that shorter event and do that. And, and I think it's important.
I think like there's some events that don't do that. And I look at it like, well, they're going to be there anyway. You could have some kind of like, maybe like in the middle, maybe like some kind of time, or like, hey guys, try to reach this time, in this amount of time. But in the end of it, we're there anyway.
Did you notice that Rob pulled out the 1983 hydration?
Well, that's a good question. David brought that up. How many miles are on that pack of yours now?
Oh, I think that's my third or fourth pack. So that So that Ultimate Direction pack, I've got about 10 of them. That's by far the best pack I've ever got. I like it. I like the color of it. And so, I mean, it's the perfect pack for me. Yeah, you guys were talking about, tough courses. I don't know if you've ever done Cloud Splitter. That's a really difficult course. Susan Howe's the race director, and there's only 2 people who have started every one of them. Last year was the 10th one, me and another woman. I got 2 DNFs there trying to do the 100K. But she gives the 100-milers 40 hours. So so the 100K, so the 100-mile gets 40, that 100K gets 40, and the 50 gets 40. And
wow.
Yeah, and so it's a very hard course. Very few people ever go back.
He's like, I've done it 10 times. So, nobody goes back.
so I always, because like ultra runner, where you can go over the side and see how many times somebody's ran it before. You always go back and you look at the hundreds. There's nobody ever coming back. But she was one of the first ones that gave the same time for the whole entire time. She's a really good race director. She started out, the first 3 were in Kentucky, and she had some problems with the landowners there, and she started looking for another place to have it. And this place in Virginia called Norton, which was an old coal town, said the mayor there was really progressive, mountain biker. He said, we'd be more than happy to have you. And he goes, I'll do anything you want if you'll bring that race here. And so, it's kind of neat to, be walking through town and people know your name. And I just feel like I got to support that race because it's really special. It kind of reminds me of the old days.
Cool.
Man, you've just got, I'll just keep scrolling through these results. It's insane how many races. I mean, I see Hellgate. I see Hurt 100. I see Pinhoti 100. I mean, it's just insane to see all that you have covered. And it's just so cool. I mean, because You do, and I see that pattern you're talking about where you say you do multiple races, but then at some point you just kind of move on and you pick a new pattern.
Yeah.
And maybe that's because the race goes away, but it's just really cool to see. And what's really cool is you get into like 2021, and that's where we meet the Rob Apple.
Right.
That's your first year you come to Fort Frenzy, and
Right.
we obviously had met you a little bit before then, just because we worked, and ran Three Sisters and
Right.
Firewall, and the Pistol, and and I just now realized that, and I guess I forgot this, but I remember now yelling at you every time I went by. But me and you ran Buffalo Mountain together.
Yeah.
The last year.
Yeah. Yeah. I was sad to see that race go away. I really liked the course, and it was a nice place to have a race.
Yeah, and they were good race directors too.
Yeah, it's one of those things that when people say this is the last year, you often hope that they reconsider or somebody else wants to pick it up. But sometimes there's nobody there to pick it up. That's one of the things that in the beginning, especially with the trail runs, a lot of times like David Horton's race, Masochist, that's where he trained. So all he was doing was inviting his buddies to come, pay money to run his course, his training course that he probably, ran on the weekends. And that in the beginning was how most of the races were ran, where now, it's totally different in the mindset that people have.
Mm-hmm. I don't know. I think me and Compton ran Eureka so many times, and then we were just like, why did this never hit us before? And then we're just like, oh, put a race on here.
Well, what's so funny, you're asking about JFK, it's kind of funny, the races that you really like, when you look back, you go, God, I can't believe I ran that 14, 15 times. And then there's the couple that you don't like, and you look back and you think, I only ran that 6 times. It felt like I ran that 20 times. Yeah, I was just looking. I don't know if you can find 2000. It's in the 300 range.
Oh yeah, we're there.
Okay, so this was probably I often try to think of the stuff that I find I know I can't do anymore, but I'm just impressed I was able to pull this off. So in August 21st, I did Leadville 100. That was the first time I did Leadville. Thank God I finished. That was the third leg of the Grand Slam. But then I fly home, red eye home, load up the car on Friday, next weekend I go back out to Montana and do Elkhorn, which was 100K. Again, red eye back, drive over to Virginia and do Great Eastern, which is in Charlottesville. Drive back home, then fly out to Salt Lake City and do Wasatch to finish off the slam.
Man. That was awesome.
That period of time, 04, 05, it was just one of those unique times. I was in my prime. There wasn't much. There wasn't anything I couldn't do, and I never got injured. It's one, to do 100 miles is one thing, but I never wanted to be that guy just hanging on, just trying to make the cutoffs. And luckily, when I was doing them, I had, I just had a half an hour to an hour cushioning, which made it fun. But to do it weekend after weekend and not get hurt, you got to be pretty lucky.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I was going to say, closing off with the races, I just want to ask you one question that goes to 800 plus races.
Right.
Obviously, from the 80s to now, you've obviously trained, you've raced, you've blah, blah, blah. How have you been able to recover? And what have you found that works for you? Like, there has to be things that you've had to battle through over the last, 20 years that you couldn't really, might impede your running or in, your schedule. But like, how have you managed to navigate that? What have you learned?
I've always tried to ice down a lot. Even, anytime after the race, even going up to the next race, I've also, get plenty of sleep. Now I'm very lucky living here. I've got the pool I can go to and ice down because it's open year round.
I see plenty of pictures.
Oh yeah,
Pictures from the Rob Apple and the pool.
Yeah. Most people don't ask me how many ultras I've done anymore. They just say, "Where's that pool?" So I think that, and I just think, I've always trained a lot. And I don't take off a lot of days. I think it really helps to keep moving.
What do you average a week?
Back when I was racing really hard, I was doing about 100 to 110 miles a week. And now I'm, like 70. So
Oh.
yeah. So 2024 I wanted to be my 800th ultra. And then later this year, I'm going to run my 200,000th mile. And so that's my next big goal. Yeah. To get that in.
Wow. The miles and the dollars are like racing.
Yeah, I've been really lucky. I mean, I've got so many friends who've had meniscus surgery or hip surgery. I've never had any surgeries. I've never had any really bad type injuries where I was out for months at a time. Just lucky, very lucky.
Well, I think you respect the process. You've seen where you were highlighting and hitting everything, and now you're like, hey, I'm just there to enjoy the journey now and go do the race. And you're not trying to, PR every single event. So.
Right. Exactly.
Well, Rob, I have to ask you one more question, and then we'll start like official questions. But this is just another one that kind of goes all the way back to the very beginning of the question that Mike asked.
Okay.
And that is, I want to feel like this gentleman is, if there's anybody that's like in the top 5 with Rob Apple, I would think that it would be Michael Montgomery.
Yeah.
I was thinking of him earlier.
So when did you meet? Like, do you remember when you met him? Like, y'all been, you've had to have crossed paths because he's like, I mean, probably several hundred at this point, like what, 500, 600 maybe?
Yeah. I think Mike's trying to get to 400.
400. Okay.
Yeah. So Mike has, our paths have pretty much, so he was in Kentucky for when I was in Ohio, and he moved to Franklin, Tennessee about the time I moved to Murfreesboro. So yeah, there's a number of people that I've known before I even moved to Tennessee. But yeah, there's a number of races that we were at before we ever came down here. We were always pretty much the same speed. He's still faster than I am now. But yeah, we've done a lot of stuff together. We've traveled together. We did Zion together. We've been to a number of places together, and he's a very good friend of mine. And that's awesome. He's incredible. He's 78 years old and still going strong.
He looks great out there.
Yeah, he really takes he takes really good care of himself. He's very strict with his diet, and he's a guy that too, like me, he races every weekend, not necessarily an ultra, but at least a marathon or some 5K or 15K, but he's done a lot.
Yeah.
Well, his name popped in my head earlier when we were talking. I was like, I got to ask this later.
Well, it's always great when I'm doing those loop courses. I see Rob and Michael always together. I'm like, look at the two legends right here just hanging out.
On ears.
Well, yeah, when those times where you think I'm so done with this stuff I do, and you think they're great crap, Rob and then Michael are still out here.
They're just out there laughing and just cackling about whatever they're talking about.
Yeah, but you've laughed.
Probably laughing at us.
Yeah, they're like, look at these morons running in circles.
That dude just puked.
He'll learn one day.
Like, I wonder how long they're going to hold that pace up. Yep, look at him. He's getting slower.
Rob, so we've got some questions from listeners that we want to ask you. But while Matt is pulling up this list, and you just give him time, it takes him a while.
I've got a few questions in multiple different areas, so this time it is going to take me a second. So,
but while he's pulling up the list, I want to ask you the question that we ask everybody, and that is, why do you run? Like, at the end of the day, why are you out there, and what keeps you going?
I just love being outside. I think that's the one thing, being an accountant where your job's inside the whole entire day, and all you're thinking about is, God, I want to be outside. I want to be outside. It's a reason to go outside. I'm very lucky to have the Greenway here. It pulls me out there, and I just can't imagine not doing it. It's I don't think about not doing it. It's not something I ever. I think sometimes people say I don't want to do that today because it's raining, or I don't want to do that today because I'm cold, and that never enters my mind. I know I got to get out there and do it and enjoy it. I'm going to feel better doing it, and it when you hear people say that you inspire them, that puts a little extra into it too. That hey, maybe me doing it gets somebody else out there to do it, or gets them to have a better race, a more fun race. I've always tried to be a good ambassador for the sport and talk about all the positives of the sport. And so, yeah, it's just something, I guess it's just something I've always done my whole entire life. And it's just what I always come back to.
I love that. I mean, if anything, you doing what you've done and being the person that you are out on that course, I mean, you do inspire people, and definitely. People love you. And like people that don't even know you begin to love you because they see what you're doing, and then they get to know you and they love you even more. So, I mean, you inspire a lot of people, and the fact that you do what you do and you do it with such joy, that's why you're on here today. And that's how we know you. It's because that is just something that is truly, we see the joy in your face when you come. And I mean, you walk into our aid station, and I just like at Firewater, I'm like, come on, Rob, let's go get a picture. You're just happy and you're excited, and we're all just over there talking to you, and like you're taking a selfie, and you've taken pictures of some crazy thing that me, Mike, and Matt have put out on the course to make fun of Matt while he's running. And it's just so fun, and you see that joy, and we just want to say thank you, because you do inspire a lot of people.
Well, thank you guys for putting the races on. You've really done a lot over there in Eastern Tennessee in a very short period of time.
Well, thank you. Thank you. We try. We're trying to do more if we can just get permits approved.
Hopefully this week. We got high hopes. We did get a little email about it, so there's very high hopes that it's this week or early Monday or something.
We need that official approval.
Yeah, we need the official part. We got good wording, but we need the actual approval. So I got a few questions. I think we do have some questions that were here from last time.
Okay.
That
you
had to reschedule.
Questions.
Yeah.
So we got some of those that I'm going to start with, and then I'll get into today's. This one says, what keeps the spark alive? What motivates you to keep going race after race?
I think it's just the explorer in me, in that, you look at my resume, and you're just always doing something different. Whether it's a different road, a different trail. I prefer road, but if you're going to do a lot of ultras, you got to do the trails. And it's just meeting all the different people. And runners are so positive, even when they're not having the best of days, and that's addictive. Just the personalities that you're around, and it's just something that you don't find everywhere.
No, it's a special community.
It is. With that being said, about you being a traveler, do you know how many states you've actually raced in?
Yeah, it's 38 and holding. I'm not going to be a 50 stater. There's some states out there that I haven't been to and I don't want to go to. So, yeah.
And do you know how many countries you've raced in?
60.
Wow. Oh, more countries than states. Wow.
Oh, countries. I thought you said hundreds. No, countries. Oh. I want to say 8. New Zealand, England, Scotland, France, Italy, and Switzerland. France, Italy, and Switzerland are my faves by far. Like I said, I've been 20 times in 10 years. So that tells you how much I love it over there.
Yeah, definitely.
Makes me want to go.
Well, the lady that I ran Ball State with the last 200 miles, she lives in Chamonix.
Yeah.
And she was talking about how she just loved it and how beautiful it was. And I'm like, well, I may need to go over there one day and run them trails.
Yes, yes. And she actually, so when you get over there and you got time to spend, you meet people. And I actually have two friends that are friends of hers that live in
Okay.
Chamonix. Yeah. So yeah, I
Oh, cool.
know.
Small world.
Yes, very,
Crazy.
very much so. Yeah.
All right. The next one says, what do you do to keep yourself from injury, and do you have a recovery protocol?
Speed kills. Don't run fast.
Oh, we're out of luck, Devin.
Stretch a lot. Stretch a lot. Definitely don't stay sitting. If you're driving to a race, get out and walk. I've always been a big advocate of icing. I don't, like I said, in the early years, I used pain medication, which you find out in the end that, all it does is mask the pain. You hurt yourself even worse, makes the recovery time even more. Just make sure you're properly trained for the race. You know that no one going into it, you had a good chance of finishing versus going in unprepared.
That's the best thing I've heard in weeks. Make sure you're properly trained. Like that's just true right there. Like you can take Tylenol, you can take ibuprofen, but a lot of times we go into this, not being ready, or you'll see people in races and they're like, "What can I do for this that's hurting?" And I'm like, I think at this point we're just, we're just hurting.
We're just trying to make it through because it ain't
Well,
getting fixed.
Well, I would say this, especially this time of the year. You got to be patient because it probably takes probably 2 weeks to get heat acclimated, and that's probably the biggest mistake I always see with ultra runners this time of year is going into a hot race and it's not been hot. I haven't got the training miles in the heat, and they end up paying for it. You just that first hot race, you got to back off. You can always speed up. It's no fun when you have to just walk and just dog it in. That makes it so much worse.
All right. The next one says, do you have a overall favorite race?
Overall favorite race. I've got a couple. Definitely, I would definitely say, anything in the Alps, French, Italian, Swiss, anything over there is beautiful. Catalina Island, where I did my 800th, I really like. That was my 11th year out there. That's a beautiful place. It has a very laid back feel. You fly into LA and take the boat over. Miwok, which is in San Francisco, 100K. That's in Marin County. It's along the Pacific Ocean. It's definitely one of my favorites. Wasatch was probably my favorite 100-mile here in the United States. All the ones out west are just incredible.
Do you know what your fastest, let's say 50K is?
Yeah, 3:46. That was on.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that was on road.
Still, that's moving pretty good. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Fire. All right. What is the hardest ultra that you ever done?
Boy, there's a number of them there. I would say UTMB was probably the hardest. That was 44 hours and 24 minutes of constant.
Man, it's a lot of time on feet.
It's a lot of time on feet. No sleep. But the beauty keeps you going. The thing about UTMB, you start Friday night, so you go right into the night. So if you're slow like me, you're going to do 2 nights.
That's okay.
You don't like to think about that going in. So yeah, definitely. The thing about Europe that is so much different than here, you can see it when you watch the race footage of the races over there. Europe, the climbs over there are just, they're so long. In Europe, things are marked by time, not kilometers or hours. And so it's literally, you'll come to a trailhead sign that'll say the pass or the call that you're going to go through is going to be 5 hours. And so you're sitting there and it's 1 o'clock and you're thinking, I'm going to spend this whole afternoon and it'll be evening when I get to the top of this climb. And it's just, I like to climb, but it just takes a lot of patience and it's very slow. I'll just
44
say
hours.
I'll just say this: 50K. I always say I've never met a 50K I didn't like. That's my favorite distance. I think hundreds, is probably my least favorite. Um, going through the night, I think is just it's always tough. And I often tell people, I don't care who you are, no matter what race you're doing, if it's 100, there's going to be a point, maybe one or two times where you're going to say, I don't know. And that's when you got to just tell yourself, I want this really, really bad.
Yeah.
And you got to push through it. And that's the thing, we all start at zero every time out. And that's what makes ultra running interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said.
So the next one says, I know there may be many, but what is a memory that really stands out on this journey?
That's a good.
Oh man. I try to make the 100s that I do. When I say 100, I mean like my 100th ultra, my 200th ultra, my 300th ultra. I try to make them something special. And probably finishing that 700th ultra in Italy in the Dolomites. It was just, I felt so good the whole entire time. That feeling of running into town and everybody's screaming your name, and
Yeah.
you're one of the few Americans there. That one's probably the one that I will remember the most.
Yeah.
And I think that's cool that you do that. Like for every 100th, you try to make something special.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's awesome that you do that, because that adds excitement for you too, and that's cool.
Yeah.
So going on with that same theme, do you have a particular race that you have in sights for the 900th and the 1000th?
No, I don't. But I would like to I'd like to get one back in Europe for 900. No, it was very interesting. Through COVID, it was just so strange not to be racing every weekend. Just that mindset of, God, when are we going to get to race again? And it really slowed down my pace of, every year getting 20 to 25 ultras. And, kind of had gone into like a race coma where it was like the numbers weren't coming along. And it was like last year in January, I kept writing in my logbook, 800 in 2024. We got to get this. We got to go. And, I had the whole year to kind of figure out which ones I was going to do and try to plan it out. But, things do happen. There's races you can't get to, but you try to get, you got to put another race in and to get there. So I'm a big believer in writing down your goals. That's just so important. No matter how small that goal is, write it down, and you're not allowed to take it off the eraser board until you accomplish it. And 900, I hope to be there in 4 years, maybe 5 years. That's 20 to 25 a year. That means I'd be 67. I think I'll still be running good. 1,000, we'll see. We'll see. Who knows?
We got faith in you, Rob.
Oh yeah. We were out there watching and supporting.
It's like anything. Maybe that 900th race I haven't even done yet. Maybe somebody's out there game planning a ultra that I haven't even seen yet. I would love to go to Patagonia. There's a couple ultras down there, and I have never been to the Himalayas. So that's another place I'd like to do an ultra. So,
well, I'll just throw this out. No big deal. But if you decide not to go to another country, then we would be glad to create a 900th race that is just for, and we can call it the Rob Apple, that we can host for everybody to come run. And it will be a 24-hour celebration that everybody can run, and it'll be an official race, and we will have fun with Rob Apple.
You can have your own race.
So if that doesn't work out, you let us know, and we will put on your 900th race.
All right.
There we go.
But
we will call that race the Rob Apple.
When I get to 885, I'm going to go back and replay this.
Yes, we got you. Is that it?
That's all the questions that I have.
All right. Does anybody else have any questions?
I know you talked about your schedule and you got your daily routine, and this I thought might be a question, so I wasn't going to hit on it earlier on. I'm assuming with your food intake daily, you're pretty structured at this point. You've got it figured out. I mean, you don't have to go into details. I know it, but I mean, your calorie and protein intake pretty solid.
I keep it pretty. I keep it pretty low. I try to keep my calories per day probably between 1,500 and 2,000.
Okay, that's low.
Yeah, it is pretty low. But you got to remember, I'm an accountant, so there's a lot of hours where I'm just sitting.
Yeah.
And 1 pound of fat is 31 miles, so it takes a lot to burn it off. So I try to stay vegetarian. I don't eat a lot of red meat. I don't eat out a lot. Try to drink a lot of water, especially at work. On the weekends, I usually only eat once a day when I get finished. So I like routine. I like structure.
Cool. We've learned a lot about you today, Rob. I love it. It's been really fun, and it's actually been just so interesting for me to see where this sport kind of has grown from to where we are now, and in a way, like how pampered we are today compared to what you dealt with when you started.
Definitely.
And I mean, I consider you one of the pioneers of around here for this sport, and you've met so many people and made an impact with so many people, just like with us. Like, we know the Rob Apple, and it's just from you being you, and we're just so grateful that we got to know you. And I believe and I'll give a shout out to the Johnston Woods. Like, I know that you're going to be the guest speaker there,
right?
And I think that's pretty awesome. I think you'll get to share even more stories there, and I think it's just something that as more and more people get to see your accomplishments, like, you're just going to leave such a mark of history on this sport. I mean, it's going to be kind of untouchable. I mean, I don't see anybody in any time frame even coming close to that record. I mean, they're going to literally have to start when they're 20.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, truthfully, they're going to have to start when they're 20, because it's not like you're going to stop in the next 2 years. They're not going to catch you. So, I just want to say, like, it's remarkable, and, it's a huge accomplishment, and what you've done and the people you've touched.
Yeah. Yeah, I was going to say,
you're just awesome.
Yeah, thank you. Because if you're listening to this podcast, the one thing I'm going to take from this that Rob didn't mention a single time is he never mentioned, like, hey, the aid station didn't have pretzels, or they didn't have my favorite hydration. You enjoyed the actual event, and you made it no matter what. Mm-hmm. So you went to the event, and you done you, and you had a great time. And you didn't focus on, the little minor details. You were making it way before we tried to pamper all runners, and we as race directors sit there and try to think of everything. And I'm like, man, we're going to forget something, but it's about being there and being present and enjoying it, what you get to do on that given day.
Yeah. And to be honest, you come up on our podcast about once every third episode.
That's true.
And it literally is me or someone else referencing, well, like Rob Apple says, if I finish, and that's been very humbling for me to hear, because I needed to hear that. And when you said that to me the first time, I was like, that's so right. Like, that's the truth of this sport. And that's the truth of, like, doing an ultra. It's like, there's no guarantee in this at all. So it's if.
Yeah.
And I love the fact that every weekend when I ask the Rob Apple, when I see him, like, what number is this? He's like, if I finish. And I love it. Like, it's just so humbling. Well, Rob, any final questions for us before we end the podcast?
I'm just glad you guys had me on. I really appreciate this. Some great questions. And like I said, we get caught up in the moment, and, you need to go back and reflect, and, printing off these spreadsheets and just going back through there. I mean, there's still a lot of it I could still go through, and I haven't looked at and taken into detail, but, thanks.
Well, it was funny. I was talking to Mary on my way home today, and she said, "Y'all are not going to try to go through every race, are you?" I said, "Hell no." I said, "There's not enough time in this day to go through all of Rob Apple's races."
Oh no, it'd be a week's worth. And you could go through the races, but then you would have the stories in the races, and it would just, that's a lot.
That's so funny. We probably won't get to say that very often, but it was like there is not enough time to even. We would have to have like a podcast every day for like 2 weeks.
Yeah, we would have to. Yeah.
But Rob, again, just from all of us at East Coast Adventures and all the listeners, like you're so loved in this sport and in this area, and we just want to say thank you.
Yep. Thank you.
And with that, we're going to end the podcast. So thank you so much, Rob.
Take care.
Thanks, Rob.